So welcome everyone to our kickoff webinar of the learning journey, how to organize your bioregion. I'm very excited to have you all here today. I'm Joe Brewer. My partner Penny Heipel and I are the co-founders of the Design School for Regenerating Earth. We are personal friends with a lot of you, so a lot of you know who we are. And we are excited to begin this 6-month learning journey. And today, our real purpose is in this webinar today is to do a couple of basic things. One is to give the planetary context of why this learning journey is happening. What is going on in the world and why is it so important that you are here? And this work that we're doing, I would call it sacred work. I would call it deep spiritual Gaian work, the work for the future of our species. And we'll lay some context out for why we think that's the case. And then we're going to explore, what is this learning journey? How does it work? What can you expect? How is it structured? What are the learning goals that we have? How are we organizing it? What kinds of supports are we putting in place for it? So we'll go into some of that, setting context for what this learning journey is. And then we'll go into a little bit of, for those of you who are less familiar, how does the Mighty Networks platform work? How will we be using it during this learning journey? And what can you expect in terms of navigating what many of you may have felt upon arriving in the design school is, oh my gosh, there's so much here. It's the typical response of new members is a feeling of overwhelm because there's just so much that is happening. Because we're holding a planetary network of bioregions that has been aspirationally bioregional, and increasingly it's aspirationally planetary, and it's increasingly literally and descriptively planetary. Members in this learning journey are participating from North, Central, South America, parts of Africa, Europe, Asia, the Mediterranean, from Oceania, from New Zealand and Australia. So I would say that we're sufficiently representative of the planet to say that we are forming a planetary network, even though we're just sampling all those different places. And so what I'm going to do now is give a presentation that will take about probably 35 or 40 minutes, and it's going to lay out this context for us. There will be a point where I'll invite Penny to come in and share a little bit with us. And then we will do a tour of the Mighty Networks platform for those who need a little help navigating. And then we'll have time for discussion so that you can ask questions and we can clarify things. And we expect this session to last about 90 minutes. And I see Bill Bowie asking, no Antarctica. Unfortunately, the research staff in that international research zone of Antarctica have not chosen to bless us with their presence yet. But after a little bit more of that ice melts, we might be able to set up colonies. Oh, is that bad gallows humor? Okay, that's a joke in very poor taste. But welcome to Planetary Collapse. We'll talk about that in a moment. So what I want to do now is I want to give a presentation that's going to give us some context. And for those of you who don't know me or haven't seen me give a presentation before, I'll just give you a little bit of an audience warning that in the beginning, we're going to talk about some things that might invoke grief and sorrow for you. I'm not going to belabor the state of the world, but I am going to name the state of the world because I think it's very important. As a designer, I feel like it's very important to know what is the design context that we're working in. And our design context has a planetary signature to it. So we'll be talking about that. So with no further ado, I will share my screen and we will get started with the presentation. So here we go. We are kicking off the learning journey for 6 months on how to organize your bioregion. And we will get to learn a lot about what bioregions are, how they can be organized in many different ways. And we'll be exploring most of that in future sessions. Today, I just want to tell you how this learning journey is going to work and what you can expect throughout the next 6 months. And so with that in mind, first, just a simple hello and welcome. Penny and I are the co-founders of the Design School, and you'll get to know us throughout the next 6 months. If we're not friends now, we hope to be friends with you soon. So Penny and I just give you a warm welcome. And just so you know, for sake of context, this photograph was taken on Beaver Creek on the Oak Ridges Moraine in the middle of the greater Takaranto bioregion, one of the contexts that we have been very lucky to collaborate in, and that some of you on this call live within. That is in southern Ontario, in the nation state of Canada, in the Great Lakes Basin. So this is a photograph saying hello from Beaver Creek and a beautiful wetland. For us to start to see, why do we need to have this learning journey? Why do we need to learn how to organize our bioregions? I want to give a very brief overview of human history that looks like this. Currently, the best scientific consensus about human origins is that Homo sapiens are about 400,000 years old. So we'll work with that number for now and say throughout the last 400 years, for most of human history, about 99% of the time, all human cultures were indigenous hunter-gatherer cultures organized within ancestral territorial landscapes. And many of those human cultures were sustainable human cultures. I like to say that all human cultures that we know of that are sustainable have been and are indigenous, but that doesn't mean all indigenous cultures are sustainable. But if you want to know what sustainable human cultures look like, it helps to look at indigenous cultures. And about 99% of human history has been indigenous peoples living in deep harmony with their bioregions. So in many ways, we're learning how to return to being humans again. And then there was this blip, this roughly 12,000 year period ever since the Neolithic Revolution, the invention of agriculture, of city-states, increasing population densities, empires and civilizations, and an unsustainable exponential growth, leading to the planetary scale, which is now in ecological overshoot at a planetary scale. And the question is, what comes next? Do we return to bioregional ways of being, or do we go extinct as a species? That's basically our choice as globalized humanity today. So the purpose for having this learning journey is to ask, how would we arrive into a future of the planet Earth that includes humans? Because if we're going to do it, it'll be because we've organized ourselves as bioregions. Now, why am I saying something so drastic? Well, one way that I like to talk about this, and many of you have probably heard me say this before, is through a holistic framework called the Planetary Boundaries Framework that was presented by the Stockholm Resilience Center, where they asked the question, for us to have a planetary civilization like we've had for throughout the last 500 years or so, well, are there any planetary limits or boundaries that if we crossed even one, this planetary globalized economy would go away? And so they were like, okay, we asked that question and they identified 9. And we talk a lot about climate change, but climate change is only one of them. There's also biosphere integrity, which is the rate of loss of biodiversity or the mass extinction event that we're in. Land system change, which is the destruction of ecosystems. Freshwater use, because only 1% of the world's water is freshwater. Biogeochemical flows, which is basically industrial runoff of nitrogen fertilizers, causing massive dead zones in the mouths of all the world's major rivers. Another is ocean acidification. Atmospheric aerosol loading, which is a fancy word for air pollution. Stratospheric ozone depletion, because the ozone layer protects all terrestrial life on all of our continents from dangerous ultraviolet radiation. And novel entities, which are things created by humans the planet can't handle. So they identified these 9, and then they went on to ask, how are we doing? Have we crossed any of them? And in 2015, they confirmed that we had crossed 4. Remember, if we cross only 1, globalized civilization is called into question. That's basically that warm, stable, Holocene climate that we've had for the last 12,000 years starts to go away, and we go on a trajectory toward what Stockholm Resilience Center calls hothouse Earth. So it doesn't mean we crossed these 4 boundaries in 2015. That means they just confirmed with really rigorous research that we verify we have crossed 4 of them. They continued doing research and added 2 more in 2021. And then in 2022, they added another one for microplastics, which is to say, if you cross only 1 planetary boundary, global civilization is probably going away, and we've already crossed 7. So that's just like a way of thinking holistically about where humanity is at a planetary scale. Another way of thinking about this, which is what these planetary boundaries are connected with, is tipping points in the global climate system, where 15 different tipping points have been identified. I'm not going to go into all of them here, but I'm going to name a couple. One is the Amazon rainforest has a biotic pump, and that biotic pump began to shut down last year due to massive deforestation, which means pretty soon that 40-million-year-old forest is going to transition into grassland savanna across half of the South American continent. The permafrost in the Arctic Circle is releasing massive explosions of methane. The Sahel monsoon in Central and Southern Africa shut down around 1970. That there are different ice sheets, like the ice sheet in Greenland, that are rapidly collapsing. The North Atlantic sea circulation, what's called the thermohaline circulation, is shutting down, which will cause rapid changes to storm tracks and storm patterns around the world, and so on. Which is to say that we have all of these tipping points in the Earth system. We are already crossing about 5 of them, and they're interrelated with each other. This is the story of abrupt, catastrophic climate change, and we're in the midst of it now, and it's unstoppable. To stop it, we would have had to do something 20 to 30 years ago, or maybe even longer. And so as we cascade through these climate system tipping points, and we accelerate, we've already accelerated through planetary boundaries, we can tell that changing your light bulbs or buying a single occupancy vehicle with a lithium battery, you have to mine the seafloor to create the battery, that these are not holistic solutions. That actually our whole civilization experiment has been called into question. And to make it even more interesting, those are Earth systems tipping points, but there are also social systems tipping points. Like if you shut down a local monsoon, then what you end up with is a massive drought, which can cause the collapse of a food shed, which can lead to regional violence. And this has already been happening going back to the 1960s and 70s. If you look at the trends for armed conflict, back in the mid-20th century, the majority of armed conflicts were ethnic and economic, but starting in the 1970s up to the present, now the majority of armed conflicts are based in degraded landscapes and changing local climate and soil quality, which is to say that water scarcity is causing tipping points into armed conflicts. And this breakdown in social stability, which are social system tipping points, are being accelerated around the world through climate change, through land system change, and through economic and political regime changes. So these are tipping points that are also happening, and we can expect a lot more of them in the next few decades. Another one is that there are currently 5 major breadbaskets of the world, and if 2 of them were to collapse in the same year, within 12 months, 2 billion people would starve to death. And all of these breadbaskets are large-scale agricultural regions which depend upon stable planetary climate, which no longer exists, which means the collapse of our food systems are imminent, even though they're very difficult to predict when they could happen. But these kinds of social system tipping points in food production are things that could happen at any time in any year as the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events continue, which is your typical diagnosis of what climate change forecasts. So we can expect this to happen sometime in the not too distant future. And then there's this thing called just-in-time manufacturing, which is that you manufacture all the parts for a car, for example, or for a smartphone in like 20 different countries, and they arrive at the factory at just the right moment. But as we saw back in 2011 with this Chatham House study, when a volcano in Iceland caused an ash cloud to flow over Europe for 5 days, that if that had only continued for a few days longer, it would have collapsed the global manufacturing infrastructure of the global economy. Because just-in-time manufacturing is incredibly brittle and incredibly susceptible if there are disruptions in multiple places simultaneously, as could happen from a major earthquake, from extreme weather events, from armed conflicts, and so on, which is to say that social system tipping points are all around us and ubiquitous. And the globalized system could collapse at any time due to these disruptions. So these are just part of the world that we're living in. And by the way, the global economy is not broken, it's fixed. It's been rigged by wealth hoarders, by the plutocratic elite, to be sure that they can control all of the world's wealth. And so you get exactly the outcome that that would lead to, which is this study by Oxfam a few years ago, saying that 99% of the world's private wealth was held by 8 white men. Is that surprising? Not really. But when you look at what's going on with the United States right now, where the billionaires are basically dismantling all of the social infrastructure and rapidly privatizing it, you could think of it as like they've come to dine on the corpse of a giant mastodon that's going extinct, because this billionaire class has already hoarded most of the world's wealth and is trying to claim the last remnants of it. So when you look at a world through this picture that I've just painted, we have to do something different because this globalized economy has no future. And so the question for us in this learning journey is, what do we do in a context like this? And we're going to talk a lot in the next 6 months about what it means to regenerate the Earth. But I want to make a very profound observation, which is that the Earth has been regenerating itself, or said another way, there has continuously been a healthy biosphere on Earth for 3.6 to 3.8 billion years. The Earth is continually cycling life, ecosystems, soil, water, all of these things for millions and millions of years. So if the Earth is always regenerating itself, then how do we know as human beings that we have regenerated the Earth? Isn't that the hubris of arrogant humans? It certainly could be with the wrong mindset. But the provocation that I'm offering for us to consider in this learning journey is, what if humans don't go extinct? How would we know that we have regenerated our ability as human beings to be part of the Earth? Well, that would tell us that a regenerated Earth is when humans have reintegrated ourselves into the natural regenerative patterns of the Earth. Humans become the part of and integral to and interwoven within healthy ecosystems, healthy watersheds, healthy regional weather systems. Humans become part of migratory patterns of animals, like the indigenous humans on the Great Plains or in the Serengeti, who would move nomadically with the herd animals, as an example of integrating humans into the natural rhythms of the place. So for humans to be part of the Earth and for the Earth to be regenerated, it means humans become patterns of living systems as part of the Earth. And that means that a regenerated Earth that includes humans is an Earth where humans have become part of the tapestry of life. Now, it's a literal fact that humans are biological beings and we are literally part of the natural world. But you can see in our globalized economy that we can live in a great illusion, a great delusion, and pretend the global economy is separate from nature and pretend humans aren't part of nature. And the long-term outcome is the extinction of our species. So the proposition of why do we organize our bioregions is because our bioregions are already regenerative patterns of a place, and we humans need to become harmonious with those regenerative living patterns of place, which is why the wisdom traditions and cultural practices of indigenous people are so important in this work, but also why planetary science, why ecosystem restoration practices are also hugely important in this work. And so what we're doing here in the design school, and we have other partners in other communities that are doing this as well, is we're weaving a planetary network of bioregions. And in this learning journey, you can weave yourself into this planetary network by weaving yourself into your own bioregion and creating learning exchanges with other bioregions as we collectively work to regenerate the Earth. So why is it that we can claim that we're doing this here in the design school? Well, I want to give you a brief history of the design school itself. I'm not going to give you the history of the larger bioregional movement. That could be a topic for another webinar. But I just want to say, how did we arrive here to this learning journey? Well, it goes back to in January 1st of 2020 with the birth of Earth Regenerators, which was a study group for a book that I hadn't published yet, that I later published, called The Design Pathway for Regenerating Earth. And through a period of 4 years, we gathered about 5,000 people that accumulated over time, exploring what does it mean to be an Earth regenerator and how do we regenerate the Earth. And then in 2023, in March of 2023, the Design School for Regenerating Earth was born. And during that year, Penny and I traveled to different places in the world, offering bioregional activations, which is that we would be invited to a landscape. So we visited the Colorado River Basin, the Great Lakes, we visited Cascadia, we visited different places to help catalyze a dynamic of bioregional activation, weaving together the beginning of a planetary network. And we structured the school around the regeneration of landscapes and bioregions. And this came to a conclusion at the end of the first year, in what was actually beginning of February of 2024, with the 7th Generation Bioregional Earth Summit, which the design school co-hosted with the Legacy Project in the greater Takaranto bioregion, and 7,000 people attended that Bioregional Earth Summit. So in 2024, we began with the Bioregional Earth Summit, and then we hosted a learning journey that went from March through September of last year called Birthing of Bioregional Learning Centers, where people began to organize their bioregions, and several bioregional learning centers were born. One of the activities that happened during that time, led by Brandon Letzinger of Regenerate Cascadia, was to host bioregional mapping workshops, something we're reintroducing this year, and we'll talk more about this, about a bioregional mapping guild, where people began to learn how to map their bioregions. But throughout this learning journey, we also supported the formation of lots of regional groups. Notice I didn't call them bioregional groups, because some of these groups knew their bioregional identity, and some of them began an exploration to figure out what their bioregional identity was. But that means we are arriving this year with a lot of existing bioregional groups, and more broadly speaking, regional groups, like groups for the Mediterranean or for Europe, that are ready to organize bioregionally in this learning journey. And the learning journey came to an end by creating a Bioregional Leaders Guild that continued starting in September of last year up until the beginning of this learning journey. And we gave birth in September of 2024 to the Earth Regeneration Fund and brought financial resources to 5 bioregions in a learning exchange around funding ecosystems for bioregional regeneration. And during this whole time, throughout 2024, there was growing coherence of the bioregional movement, not only in the design school, but also through networks by the Bioregional Weaving Labs Collective and Common Land Foundation, by other groups that were beginning to take on a bioregional lens, like the Transition Network and Global Eco Village Network and Gaia Education, and et cetera, many, many people starting to come into coherence with this way of thinking at holistic bioregional scales. And so here we are in March of 2025, starting this learning journey, how to organize your bioregion. And with that history building up to the present, we see that we can understand this 6-month period as building on what came before, but also laying groundwork for what is still to come. And so what we see is that this 6-month learning journey can be, in a simple way, understood as divided into part 1 and part 2. The first 3 months, which is going to be 6 webinars, because there's a webinar every 2 weeks, 2 webinars per month, is we're going to explore key concepts and approaches for bioregional organizing. We'll talk about how the human imagination and narrative can organize a bioregion, how the movement of water organizes a bioregion, how to organize bioregionally around learning ecosystems, around funding and governance. We'll be exploring these kinds of ideas to create a shared language and shared understanding in the first 3 months. But then in the second 3 months of the learning journey, we're going to bring practical guidance with case studies and real-world organizing, which is that some of you in the design school are already organizing your bioregions. Others, by 3 months from now, will be beginning to organize your bioregions, and you'll be able to share what you're learning with each other through the scaffolding and supports of this learning journey. So 3 months of creating shared understandings. What does it mean to organize bioregionally, and what are the basic ways of doing it? And then in the second half of the learning journey, how are people doing this in the real world, and how can we learn from each other as a planetary community of practice? So the focus of this learning journey, the main things we want to achieve are these. We want to learn about bioregions in 2 senses. We want to learn the history of bioregionalism. We want to learn what a bioregion is. We want to learn how to organize a bioregion, but we also want to learn about the Cascadia bioregion, about the Ozarks, about the forests of the Northeast, about the forests of the North Sea, about the Northern Andes, and so on. We want to learn about different place-based efforts so that we can be a planetary learning community of Earth regeneration, where we're regenerating our own bioregions and learning together. And then we want to be organizing the patterns of bioregions. What that means is we want to learn about organizing patterns, but we also want to practice creating organizing patterns of bioregions throughout the next 6 months, which means we want to practice organizing with what we're calling in the design school, we're calling them design immersions, which is to apply design thinking with immersive real-world experience in actually organizing your bioregions. So we want to encourage members of the design school to host a design immersion and to invite other members of the design school, as well as members of your own bioregion, to attend those immersions. And about 3 weeks ago, we hosted a week-long immersion in Barichara, Colombia, where Penny and I live. And there was another earlier immersion back in January in the Greater Takaranto bioregion around funding ecosystems. And we already have others in the network in France and on the River Thames in the UK who have already placed their immersions on the calendar. And Cascadia is hosting a bioregional finance, the Cascadia BioFi Summit, which is another immersion, that are all on the calendar in the design school and that you could attend. So we're going to practice organizing design immersions, where you can attend the immersions of other members, or you can host your own and invite people to attend yours. And this leads to really strong learning exchanges among the bioregions associated with the learning journey. And that builds coherence toward this understanding of a bioregional Earth, an Earth where humans have organized ourselves bioregionally in service to the regeneration of the Earth. So these are the major learning objectives. Learn about bioregions, create a learning community, learn the organizing patterns of bioregions, practice organizing in the real world, create exchanges between each other, and move toward a planetary network that is coherent at a planetary scale. That's the purpose of this learning journey in the next 6 months. Now, the way that we hold this complexity is to leverage the natural rhythms of the world around us. And one of those important rhythms is the Earth-Sun cycle that creates the seasons of the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere. And these seasons have a pattern like this. Our learning journey is beginning on the spring equinox of the Northern Hemisphere, or the autumn equinox of the Southern Hemisphere, and then it lasts for half a year. So we're running from March through September, so that we go through half of an annual cycle. And that's how we're structuring the rhythms of the design school, is an annual cycle where from equinox to equinox, we host this learning journey. And during these 6 months, we know that all of you are very busy and you have a lot going on. So we want to make it easy for you to stay engaged with the learning journey. And so I'll tell you right now, you do not need to do any homework. You do not need to attend any live sessions. All of our webinars and community calls will be recorded. And if you can't watch them live, you can watch the recordings. And we've created a structure where what we encourage you to do at minimum is every 2 weeks, attend or watch this webinar. A 90-minute webinar every other Tuesday, so every 2 weeks, that you either watch live or you attend it live or you watch the recording. But then also, because we're dealing with the Eastern and Western hemispheres, we've decided to create community calls in 2 different times. One time that's better for the Western hemisphere and one time that's better for the Eastern hemisphere. So there's a Thursday call every other week, and there's a Sunday call or a Monday morning call, depending on where you are, so that you can choose which community call is best for the place where you live. And the idea is that we encourage you to at least watch the recordings of the webinars, and better still, attend them live, and better still, attend the community calls. But really, you are busy. Do as much or as little as makes sense to you. But the more you participate, the more you're going to get out of this experience. We just want to make it easy for you to manage your time throughout a 6-month period. So at minimum, watch one webinar recording every 2 weeks. And then from there, you can go as deep as you want into all of the rest. And so one thing I want to really emphasize about the design school is, yes, this learning journey is hosted on a digital platform, but our intention is to give more weight to what's going on the ground. So you can see in this image, the online work weighs less. We give more weight to the on-the-ground work because we actually need to regenerate our bioregions. So we want to encourage you to organize locally, to take what you're learning from the online portion and share it into your community, to bring this learning onto the ground in your own place. And the best way that we'll be doing that in the learning journey itself is through these design immersions. So as I mentioned, we had a body chart immersion just before the learning journey began. Design school members are already hosting other immersions. There are groups like R3.0 that will be hosting bioregional confluences, which you could think of as another kind of immersion. And what we want to encourage is all of you, sometime during the next 6 months, to organize a local event and to take what you're learning in this learning journey to practice organizing locally, and to bring what you learn back to this planetary network of bioregions to help other people to learn. So that the emphasis is what you learn in your own community, organizing on the ground. So these design immersions, which we'll learn more about, we'll have a focused webinar on design immersions, so you can really learn deeply what we mean by this term. But the important thing to know now is this learning journey is to take online supports to help you do your work on the ground, and to really focus that work on the ground and invite members of the design school to come to you, or for you to go to them and to meet each other in person, which is really important. Now, one thing that I've learned, because I have a background in complexity science, is that coherence is really important. And the way that we hold coherence with the complexity of everything happening in the world is that we create a very simple kind of regularity, which is we have other activities and other things happening in the real world that connect to the regularity of, oops, that was a weird glitch, of a biweekly flow of every other week, there's a webinar and a community call that repeats biweekly. So you have a 2-week rhythm that repeats throughout the year. Every other Tuesday, there's a webinar, and every other Thursday and Sunday, depending on which one you choose, there's a community call. And if you can hold that rhythm for those 2-week cycles, then you can add on whatever else you want to connect with that 2-week cycle. So some of the other things, just things that are happening connected with the learning journey or with the design school, is there are lots of bioregional learning exchanges. People within and between bioregions are learning from each other outside of the webinars and the community calls, as well as in them, but they're happening out in the world. There's this area called the inner space that Penny's going to talk about in a moment to cultivate your capacity to be able to do this bioregional work and to be an earth regenerator. And that has its own rhythm that is coherent with the webinars. And then there are all the on-the-ground activities that you might be doing in your own community. There are these design immersions and ways of activating bioregional regeneration processes. There's this weaving of local communities, like you might weave watersheds or communities within a watershed, depending on the scale that you're organizing at. There's all of the stuff on the Mighty Networks platform. We have multiple self-guided learning resources. There are literally hundreds of hours of webinars. You could go through as many or as few of them as you like, in addition to the webinars of this learning journey. There are the resource hubs, which is to say that every bioregional group associated with the design school that has leadership and that hosts regular meetings can request to set up a resource hub and organize their materials for learning exchanges with other bioregions. And currently there are about 15 resource hubs that are very active in the design school. And we anticipate through this learning journey that number will grow a lot. And then there's the Bioregional Mapping Guild that's going to begin in April, in about a month, and all of the other kinds of capacity building that are going to be happening in the design school. And then there are various member-led activities. Many of you as members are already leading activities. One example I'll give is Bill Bowie of R3.0 has been hosting a series on bioregional carrying capacity. But there are many, many other member-led activities happening in the school, and they are anchored to the rhythm of the learning journey to be coherent with each other. So as you can see, the design school has this huge complexity, but if you just focus on the bi-weekly rhythm of the learning journey, then you can manage as much or as little engagement in the design school as feels appropriate to your needs. But we've also been very thoughtful about identifying what are the supports for this learning journey that can make it as successful and meaningful as possible. So around this learning journey and how to organize your bioregion, we've created 4 separate spaces. And I'm going to ask Penny to come in a moment to talk about them. Right now, I'm just going to name them first. There's the inner space, which is cultivating inner leadership capacities. And Penny leads and hosts that space. So she'll speak about that in a moment. There's the Bioregional Mapping Guild that Brandon Letzinger and others are setting up and that will launch in about a month. That will be unfolding throughout the time of the learning journey. There's a deep dive for bioregional organizers that came out of our Bioregional Leaders Guild. That is another space where you can really get support if you're already more advanced in your organizing. And there's a regenerative finance lab that I host every other week, where we're actually practicing creating regenerative finance and flowing resources into landscapes. So now, Penny, I'd love to hand it over to you to speak about these different supports.
Thanks so much, Joe, and thanks everybody for being here. This is there's a lot of energy here now, and I think this is the time for us to be stepping up into this kind of work. So I'm so excited to be here with you all today. I just wanted to name briefly these 4 different supports that are actually complementing and interweaving with the learning journey that you can take advantage of if you have the time and the intention. So the first one is the Inner Space series on cultivating our inner capacities for bioregional leadership. And this series is going to be happening on the weeks when the learning journey is not happening at the same times on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So 11 a.m. Central on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the purpose of that series is to cultivate the inner work that we need to do to be powerful, wise, and devoted leaders. So we all know, I think everybody on this call knows that we have to do the inner work at the same time we're doing the outer work, that really they're not separate, that the trauma work is critical in all of this, the just reconnecting to ourselves, reconnecting to each other as human beings, reconnecting with the earth, cultivating our sovereignty to be able to act in alignment with our purpose and to be able to act with integrity, to be able to sense make the context of the world as it is and be able to act in a way that's effective. It's effective for the changes that we're wanting to make for regenerating the planet. So we're going to explore all kinds of different topics, and there's going to be a introductory session next week on Tuesday at 11, so you can learn more about what we'll be exploring together and join in. And then we have this deep dive for Bioregional Organizers group. And this group is within the Bioregional Leaders Guild in the school. And it came out of some regular sessions we had been having in the guild, where we saw the need for a group for people who are already organizing, starting to organize in their bioregions, and leading that work to be able to support each other in that work in a deeper way. So we'll have leaders from different bioregions coming forward and sharing their context, sharing their challenges, asking for support from other leaders in a deeper way. And this is going to be happening once per month on the second Monday of the month. Then we have as Joe said, the Regenerative Finance Lab, which is where Joe is leading that work on the Earth Regeneration Fund and all the various threads of that. And that happens every other Friday. And then the Bioregional Mapping Guild is going to be launching another workshop series with Brandon Letzinger. Brandon, maybe you can share a little bit about that in the comment thread. That would be great, just what that's going to be. It will be starting up in April, so mid-April, and then going through the end of the year, the end of May sorry, not the end of the year, 6 sessions through the end of May. So all of these activities support and complement the learning journey, and I encourage you to join any of those that feel like they would be good for you.
Thank you, Penny. So as you can see, we're taking very seriously a holistic approach to how we can support people in this work in addition to the webinars. And so you will get to experience and explore as much of this as is helpful for you and that you have capacity to participate in. So we welcome you to participate in all of these activities in addition to the webinars and community calls of the learning journey. Now, one of the things that I just want to really emphasize is how this rhythmicity, this notion of natural cycles works. If you look at the way that we structure the learning journey to function, it works on a lunar cycle, which is a 28-day cycle, which is that there is a 2-week or a biweekly rhythm that repeats itself. So on the first week of that rhythm, there's the learning journey webinar and community calls. And then there's the interspace sessions. And for those of you who are organizing your own regional groups, many of you are already holding meetings on that alternating week. And then this biweekly rhythm just repeats continuously. Every other week, there's a webinar and community call. And then on the alternate weeks, there's interspace sessions and regional group meetings throughout the 6-month period that continue and can even continue after the learning journey comes to an end. So I just wanted you to have a feeling of that rhythm so you can see how we can hold the complexity of our work is by having repeating cycles that can accumulate over time. And one other thing I want to emphasize as we're preparing to close this presentation part of the webinar today, is I want to just emphasize that the Earth is already self-organizing herself. The planet is a living, breathing, flowing, moving planetary system that has many patterns that are invisible to us. These patterns you can see visualized here. This is thermal mixing. This is surface currents of water moving with different temperatures that are creating mixing in the world's ocean. And so this pattern of mixing is visualized by creating this kind of a graphic with lots of data. But until it was visualized, humans couldn't see it. And so the important thing here is that the Earth is already self-organizing in many, many different ways. And for us to learn how to organize our bioregions, we have to see these natural patterns of the Earth and organize ourselves into them. We have to become part of the natural patterns of the Earth, which means we need to make the invisible visible, which is going to be a big part of what we're doing in this learning journey throughout the next 6 months. And now what I want to do is invite Penny to share her screen and take us on a quick tour of the Mighty Networks platform so that you can see how to navigate to these different offerings in the school. And then after that, we'll be able to have a discussion. So Penny, I'd love to hand it over to you.
Great, thank you. All right, so hopefully you all can see my screen now. And so this is the Mighty Networks platform, the design school platform. And I'm not going to show you everything here. I'm just going to show you a few items to get you started exploring. And then there's a welcome and orientation area here that will guide you more thoroughly into each of the different spaces and tell you how to navigate. But I wanted to just highlight a few things today. So first, I want to highlight where to enter your profile information if you have not done so already. You click this avatar icon here, the little down arrow, and then choose, just click on here on your name or choose personal settings. This goes directly to your profile. And what we ask that you do is especially put in your location. Down here, there's an option to put your location. And that's really important so that we can find each other in the learning journey. We're also going to be sharing a link to a Google Doc where we're going to collect people's locations and add them to a map so that we can start to visualize and see each other on the map and find each other more easily. So really important is to come in here, fill in at least like a little tagline for yourself and your location so that we can find each other. And then the other things I wanted to show you are these 4 spaces that we were just talking about a moment ago. So first is, this is the space for the How to Organize Your Bioregion learning journey. And it's down here under the Live Learning Center. So if you click into here, which probably all of you have done in some form or another to be on this call, you'll see here the main feed, the events area where you RSVP for your events, the course materials area, tags that'll help you sort through the feed, and then there's a members list in the chat area as well. So this is where you come to join all the events and to find the recordings. The recordings will be posted here in the main feed and also in the course materials area. So come back here to check for the recordings, which we will post probably within 24 hours of each session. And then right below this space is the inner space. So this is where you can join in on that inner space series that's on the alternate weeks. Under the events area, you can see here is the introductory session that you can RSVP to join, and then the core sessions on Tuesdays and the integration sessions on Thursdays. And then the Bioregional Mapping Guild, which Brandon it'll be coming more active soon. Right now we have this learning area that has the past workshop that Brandon led, so please go watch those videos if you haven't already. And then soon actually, I think he's already starting to post the events for the new series, which he did already. So you can go and RSVP for those now. And then we also have the Regenerative Finance Lab just below that, which is where Joe hosts the Regenerative Finance Lab on a biweekly basis on Fridays. So you can go to the events here and RSVP for those sessions as well. And again, in all of these spaces, you'll find the recordings posted in the feed and also in the recordings or course materials or resources area. And then finally, we have the Bioregional Leaders Guild, which is where this deep dive bioregional organizers group is being hosted. And you can see right here in the feed is the event. You can come here and RSVP for that. In the resources area, you'll find the recordings from our previous sessions in the Leaders Guild as well, if you wanted to catch up on that. And then I just wanted to say a little bit about two of the other main spaces of the school that you'll be interacting in. It's up here in the home area. The first one is the Bioregional Learning Exchange space, and then the second is the Member Lounge. So within the Bioregional Learning Exchange space, this is where all of our regional groups are posting their events. So if you go to the events area here, you'll see all of these different events from all the different groups hosting events, and there's more coming. So check there for your area to see if there's a group you can join, and then some more will be coming online. So keep coming back and checking. And then in the feed, this is where people are posting recordings of their meetings. They're posting events that are happening in their bioregion. This is where we exchange learnings across our bioregions in a feed format. We've also been hosting bioregional update sessions here, so you'll find the recordings there. And yeah, so this is a major area of the school that you'll be interacting in. The other space, the last thing I want to show you is the Member Lounge. This is where people come to introduce themselves when they first join. So just to see people's introductions come here, it's really inspiring just to see people introducing themselves. And then you can share, it's sort of like the catch-all for things you want to share. Like you just watched an amazing podcast that you want other members to know about. You have a recommended event that you want to recommend people attend. You have a request for other members. You can post questions and polls. And so this is where you come to interact with other members in a more general way. And there's a lot more to explore. So down here are the resource hubs. You can explore all that. Just go through the orientation and you'll learn how to navigate this over time. And that's all for now. And just let me know if you have any questions. You can always chat message me with any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Penny. So I'd love to open it up to questions. And so if you could use the hand raising option, for those of you who know how to do that, there's a button at the bottom that says raise hand. You can raise your hand if you have questions. And while we're waiting for questions to come in, I will describe our business model, because people are often sort of shocked, like how do I get all of this for $5 a month? And the answer is that Penny and I are funded by a Novo Foundation grant, which means we don't need to be paid. And then those $5 per month accumulate into a funding pool that enables us to pay for the Mighty Networks subscription, for our Zoom accounts, for web hosting, like basic things that are fixed costs of the school. And then the remaining money goes into that bioregional activation funding pool that you might have briefly seen in the Regenerative Finance Lab, which we use to support regenerative projects on the ground. And the reason that we don't make the design school free is because we keep the free riders out and keep the spam to a minimum, and the quality of relationships is super high. But also, some of our members donate into a scholarship fund to pay the $49 per year for a scholarship, to offer scholarships to those who request them. So actually, no one is turned away for lack of ability to pay, even at this very low rate. But we do this intentionally to have a filter someone has to actively choose to cross to enter the school, which gives dramatically higher and more significant commitment to being in the community. And you'll really feel that with the quality of conversations we have here. So I just wanted to name that part of the design school that is often a bit of a mystery to people, so that you would have a sense of that. And then I see we have two hands up, so I will go over to Kyle for his question.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you, Penny, and thank you, everyone, for everything you're doing. Just a quick question. I noticed there was, in one of your slides, Joe, Black Swan. It was, I think, part of a book cover or something. And obviously, in your review of the situation we're facing, there are a lot of black swans in motion or that could come. One of the inspirations to my work is John Elkington, who wrote a book about green swans. And so I was wondering if you and Penny and the community you've built over these years have, to balance out the darkness and the trauma and the impacts of facing all these black swans with a review or identifying green swans that could turn things around and give us hope and give us fuel. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Kyle. And I'll draw attention to two resources. Bill Bowie may be able to find the link and drop it into the chat. But in the Bioregional Carrying Capacity series he's been hosting, he invited a presenter to talk about positive social tipping points. And there's also a session that happened in the R3.0 conference last year on positive social tipping points that I think Bill could find the links to. But what I would mention in general is that a key part of the knowledge base for all of this work is understanding of complexity and emergence. And so I'm actually trained as a complexity scientist as well as an Earth system scientist. And I have a really deep understanding of how emergence works. And one of the conditions for emergence is to have instability spread across scales. When you have the ability to hold stability starts to break down, that's when there's a breakdown in order and the possibility of other kinds of emergent order. And so the key then becomes to have a fractal strategy, a strategy where you build rhythms and structures at multiple scales and in multiple places simultaneously. Thus, the planetary network of bioregions, that we're translocal, we're being in multiple locations simultaneously. That is, if you want to say, the green swan. But what it doesn't do is it does not avoid or stop the collapse that's happening, because the collapse is inevitable and unstoppable. What it does do is it opens the possibility of there to be the continuation of the human experiment afterwards, and actually a much better way of life than what globalized neoliberal capital and colonialism gave us. And so this can be a big conversation flow. It can come in and out of all the other conversation topics as we move forward. But just to name that, we're very intentional about this kind of knowledge being applied in what we're doing. So yes, that's like my teaser of many conversations to come. And thanks so much for bringing it up. And now, Shannon, over to you.
Sorry, let me figure out the mute button. Some technologies escape me. Hi, I'm Shannon Dobbs, and I'm transmitting out of the Front Range in Colorado. And I'm, first of all, blown away, absolutely excited that this framework just dropped into our laps right about the time that we absolutely need it. So thank you both very much for and everybody else involved for putting these things together. My question, so I'm coming from the food justice movement, and I kind of worked my way over to regenerative design from there. And so I'm working on weaving a lot of different aligned causes and movements that are working on the grassroots level in kind of similar directions. And so my question is kind of twofold. What capacities exist in the design school for bringing in aligned energies from other areas that aren't necessarily in this school? Or how can we bridge ourselves as communication scaffolds or networks to be able to transmit out to these wider communities and to be able to share resources? And especially groups like the Ethereum localism movement that's working on blockchain technologies as a verification and transparency and distributed governance mechanisms across what could be, you know, a part of the stratum or part of the substrate that we're kind of collectively dealing with. Like, what to what extent have you guys thought in that direction, and how can we line up what we're doing on?
Shannon, this is a great question, and it's related to Kyle's question about green swans, in that the most important and most valuable part of the design school is you as members. What you're going to discover is there are a bunch of amazing people here. And sure, I give a good talk and I'm a pretty smart guy, but I'm one person. So this is not about me. When you start to meet the others, you're going to find there are a lot of amazing people here. And most of these amazing people are in more than one community already. So part of this is just cultivate yourself as a holistic being and bring that holism to the other spaces that you're in. Okay. That's one, but that's not the only one. We're also very intentional about co-scaffolding or bidirectional scaffolding, which is we build a support for one group and that group builds a support for us. And a great example of that many people on this call are experiencing right now is Regenerate Cascadia created the Cascadia cohort, just as an example, where they have a cohort. They invited people from Cascadia to join the learning journey. They get to benefit from all of our scaffolding of this learning journey. But then we have Andra, who's here on this call. Andra's amazing. Andra is the host of the Cascadia cohort to scaffold the learning that they're doing in Cascadia. And then we're supporting each other through the 6-month period and then beyond. And similarly with R3.0, they're moving toward a conference in September, and we're co-scaffolding. We're building supports for their work, and their work is building supports for our work. And these are just examples because it's actually multi-directional. So the thing that I encourage is for you to think about how can you be translocal in terms of stories, which is you're in a story of the learning journey, you know, you're living out this pattern, but what do you bring to the Ethereum group and the blockchain and then the Web3 and the refi spaces? And what do you bring just to the work on the Front Range? Like, what do you bring to DAR and to other, you know, the Yellow Barn and other groups that are there in Boulder and Denver, and et cetera, just to give examples. How do you bring what they're doing into this story? And how do we bring these stories together? So much more to say, but I'd say the key is to recognize scaffolding, which is developmental supports that are temporary. You bring in a support when it's needed, it enables something to get to its next stage, and then you dismantle the support. We build scaffolds and we build them toward each other. And as we do that, we're going to support multiple communities simultaneously. So much more to say on that, but that's like the strategy that we've been using, and a lot is happening already. So to be continued.
Joe, would you mind if I say something about that?
Sure, go ahead.
So I'm going to be hosting a couple of systems team groups, and we're working specifically on identity and also on, I don't know how to say it, but certain types of mechanisms which will allow us to identify one another to create scalable trust would be one of the ways that you guys talk about it. But I have 4 initial teams that we're going to be working on And about a month from now, we're going to have a series of 3 conversations to discuss exactly what you're talking about. Like, how do we know who's in what network? How do we integrate across networks? And rather than scaffolding, we're thinking about this as the underlying infrastructure. I mean, like the word mycelium has been used so bazillion million times. But yes, we are working on that, and there will be a team dedicated to that. And I welcome you.
I'm using carrier signal.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. Was there something else you wanted to throw in while you got the spotlight that you had your hand up for, or was that it?
That was
No,
it.
that was it. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Then I'll pass the mic over to Bree. Bree, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm just so happy to be here. And many of you heard Joe and Penny speak about the immersive that they just recently had. And so many of us were there together. And it goes back to the thread that we're just following right now. Specifically, upon our return, there is significant activity happening in the Five Rivers, which is, on the boundaries of the GTB. And we're just so incredibly in conversation on so many levels. So much is happening. And so just circling back to this question specifically, I'm happy to migrate with Grace and other layers, but our cohort is ready to be connecting regularly in alliance and paralleling the learning journey. So is there a method to establish a hub so that these conversations and connections can not only happen within our community, but then of course invite the larger bioregion? Or should we go back to what you were just explaining, having these hubs that are in existence intact, kind of paralleling outside of the design school? So we're just ready to know which way to go there so that we can really follow this, not only this learning journey, but what is emerging. There's a connection wanting to happen with your community in Barichara, with some more to that, or just redirect to where we just been. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bree. And I think that part of the answer to this question is, as we start to explore what it means to be organizing bioregionally in a shared way, so we have shared understanding of it, that then it'll be easier to see how to weave what you're doing on the ground into this planetary network. And of course, you already know that there are the resource hubs, and Penny helps different groups to set up a resource hub. And you've already been inviting people from your local community to form a cohort in the learning journey. So some of that like early stage organizing is already in place. And so I think as we just develop a little bit of shared language through this learning journey, it'll become much easier to answer this question in a systematic way, which is that right now I would use words that some of the people on this call don't really know what we're referring to yet. But as we get a little bit further in, and not very far in, we'll start to see that together. So, and in the meantime, you can always reach out to Penny about setting up a resource hub, and she's building a support team around her to help her to manage the large numbers of people that are now wanting to be able to get this support. So yeah, thank you, Bree, and onward we go. And now over to you, Maria Angel.
Just a second. Yeah, two things about your presentation, which I've already talked about before maybe, but they seem pretty essential to me. The very beginning, you spoke about the 400,000 years of human societies presence on the earth, and then 12,000 years ago, everything changes. But you didn't make 2 points. The transition is from goddess dominant spirituality to God revealed Father God spirituality. And it also ushers an enormous population growth as a direct result of that. And the population growth, which I'm surprised you didn't put the curve there, is what's at the back of everything, all these tipping points and that are being crossed. So that was one thing I thought was about the inner space really opening an investigation into that, because it's so deep and it's so central and it concerns every one of us, our relationship between men and women all the time, that it seems to me it would be something absolutely necessary. Or I wonder if you would agree. The second one was right at the end when you talked about biospheric system. As some of you may know, I've worked with the Biosphere 2 creators, especially John Allen, but all the team there. They are now on Sinigay Ranch in New Mexico. Chris Deal and Beans will meet them not a few weeks. And of course, they have a whole unique body of understanding and research on biosphere, biospheric science. That's another thing that I think that just will benefit a lot from. So you told me, Joe, that it'd be best to connect people. So I've started to talk. I'm going to talk a lot when I come back to every one of the old friends, members there, to see if one or two or three would connect directly and help me maybe make a part of the school about biospheric science. Because when you say self-organizing, it's a wonderful word, but there's a lot under that. And the Biosphere 2 was created to last 100 years in order to explore how does it self-organize and how do we fit in there. Because from the point of view of the creator, John Allen in particular, the whole rise of patriarchy has this aim, maybe subconscious, to take life off planet, to become solar system beings. It's a big one, and I think it needs to be incorporated because I think we have too much of this. Otherwise, this kind of dead end collapse. We're going to have to reduce population, regenerate madly until the population and the regeneration match. Well, there is another path at the back of all that, which is this path of exploration of a system and this other world, Mars, that is had an attempt at life, apparently, and would be a motivation, because a lot of people say when I talk like that, they say, oh yeah, well, we're not going to make the same mess on Mars as we did here. No, we would not. Because the moment that we start to focus on how to move a biosphere from this planet to another planet, it changes everything in our outlook. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, thank you, Marie-Angel. I want to emphasize 2 points that strongly resonate with what you're saying. One is that we will have a webinar focusing specifically on narrative and imagination, where we'll go into some of the elements of cosmovision for how to organize bioregionally, which will get us into that space of the sacred feminine very directly. So I'm just naming as a teaser of things to come, that is something that is very, very important. And then to acknowledge what you said about understanding the systemic nature of ecological science, all the way up to planetary ecology. And as I know you're deeply enmeshed in human ecology, which are basically the same science in some sense, that the surprises come about in how the emergence actually works. And so thank you for bringing that in, and to be continued for sure. So thanks for both of those points, and I'll pass it over to John.
Hi, and thank you very much for this. This is great. I think it'll be a pretty quick question. We interacted a little on LinkedIn on this, and it was the question of like language and is there a glossary? Because I kind of came up through limnology and like academic science. I did a little detour or parallel journey in permaculture, and now anyhow, I'll just sum it up. Is there somewhere on the site where there's kind of like a glossary, maybe like a Wikipedia type page of themes? Because one thing that kind of panics me a little in the sort of global regenerative space is it does still seem, as one of the other people mentioned, like there's a lot of groups and the overlap isn't quite as perhaps synergistic as it might be. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I would say that creating a standard glossary has not been done. Although there's some well-organized resources, like there's a self-guided learning journey on regenerative finance and things like that, where you can go fairly deeply into a domain. But I think one of the key things in all of this, related more to the second question, is that as we will explore throughout the whole learning journey, the nature of mapping as a colonial tool And then also in parallel, the use of residential schools and basically education of as a weapon of cultural genocide. That bioregionalism in many ways is directly the undoing of all of that. How do you relearn how to live in place? How do you recover local language? How do you recover local ecology? And this is where we start to discover deeper concepts that are synergistic. So just as an example, I live in Colombia in the Northern Andes, and the word bioregion is not common here. But when I start to talk to people about ancestral lands and words like territory, we end up finding we're actually talking about bioregions. So we're able to do a fairly direct translation, not exactly the same, but they're similar enough that we can build a shared cultural understanding. And I think that this becomes really important, is the recognizing that there are deep concepts like your body is literally animated dust. Your body is literally the Earth's crust animated with the Earth's water moving it. You're literally the Earth animated, and that you come from somewhere. And then we start to see that there's this commonality from basic truths that then allow us to translate between very diverse cultures. And so, which becomes really important when we talk about things like the two-eyed way of seeing, which is something that's common among the indigenous peoples of the Great Lakes, where you basically recognize there are different worldviews that will never be the same. You don't force them to be the same. You recognize they are fundamentally different in important ways, but they can find partnership and mutual respect. And so there are these ways of going to that deeper, more subtle space that I think is really going to be important as we navigate the complexity of the diversity of places. There are many diverse places. Even with the 200 or so people that have been on this call today, we're representing many diverse places. And that doesn't mean those people adequately represent their place. No. Representativity, the ability to represent a bioregion, is a huge topic in its own right. And so just to say, we'll be exploring those kinds of elements and themes throughout the learning journey in various ways. They'll keep coming up, and we'll be navigating not around them, but through them. We'll bring them up and explore them as we go because they're so important. So that's just to say that we lean into the complexity of those questions rather than shying away. And then we'll find our way through as we go. So yeah, big topics, and thanks for bringing it in, John. I'd say we'll hold them as inquiries rather than answer them adequately now, but we'll hold them as inquiries as we move forward. So thank you so much for bringing them in. And then over to Eliza. Hello, Eliza.
Hello, Joe. So happy to be here. Super key focalizer for the Water Unity Network that just finished a water tour in Africa. And I'm curious as to, I've signed up for the Ether in terms of being able to benefit someone else. I am not seeing any Africans here, and I will report that there is a tremendous movement happening there into regeneration, and but they have very little resources. So I'm curious as to how this community can help support them. So that's one question. The other question is, can I assign my sort of gift subscription? And can I sign up for more than one? Because I have some key people there that are ready and willing and excited about joining the global regeneration. And we just need to help them financially. So,
Eliza, thank you so much. And I'm so glad you're here. I'll start by saying the main reason that there are not more people from the continent of Africa so far is a combination of specific individuals who approach us in a way that's pretty common after colonialism, of just trying to get white people to give them money, but don't actually care about commitment or relationship. We've been approached by multiple people that are like, give us scholarships. And then you quickly discover they're just trying to get money and there's no real reciprocity or relationship. Together with a mixture of people who are just in non-overlapping cultural spaces so far, which is to say that the cultural spaces where a lot of the work has been cultivated so far is not overlapping with networks of trust with people in those other spaces where they would then find their natural fit to be here. And that's partly just it's like the founder effect in a certain sense. Where you start from is what you look like for a while. And then eventually that can change. And so what we found happening overall is that the people that we work with who are embedded in different parts of Africa are already deeply engaged in the work there, but that doesn't mean the people in their community get the value of this global work. So depending on the network, and I'll just give an example that we worked with. There's several people in design school in South Africa who are doing work there, but that doesn't mean a lot of people in South Africa have come into the design school. And similarly, there are people in different parts of Eastern Africa and various countries doing work on grassroots economics development, but that doesn't mean the members of their local community have found value in coming into this online community. And then there's also just connectivity issues with the internet and so on, depending on the place. So there's just various factors. But now to answer your question directly, yes, you can give a scholarship and request to go to a specific person, and you just talk to Penny about doing that. The problem we found is that when scholarships have been assigned to people who actually didn't want to be here, it ends up being money wasted because those people don't participate. So just something to be aware of is that, like you thinking someone with dark skin should be here, just as an example, doesn't mean that that specific person wanted to be here. So that's a mismatch in giving scholarships that's happened, where scholarships have been given to people who then just never showed up. And so recognizing that the reciprocity and the commitment and the feeling of relationship is, and I know you know this, just naming that it's really important, and that's how it comes into being. And so, yes, you can give multiple scholarships, but the better way to do it is, as some people on this call have done, is to gather a cohort. Say, like, I'm actually paying for 5 people to join because we're all working in the same community and we want to organize as a community. That way of thinking, I think, is proving itself to be very effective. So, but we could also just have a separate call about strategies for this, because the strategies are really about how to build meaningful relationships. Yeah, and then that diversity of representation comes through the relationships themselves. Because I completely agree with you, it's very important. So I'd love for us to do it as well as possible.
Great, thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Eliza. And now over to, how do you pronounce it? Is it Zemek? My Polish is terrible.
Zemek.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, thanks, guys, for all the work that you do. It's really amazing to be part of the design school and have all the opportunity to get learnings and access to the wonderful people all over the world. I had a question regarding kind of in regards to diversity, right? And biodiversity and the ideas of a variety of different approaches. I was recently in central Poland for a bioregional center that's opening in the central Wisła river, which is the main river that runs through Poland. And it is a part of an initiative by the Ashoka Foundation that are establishing bioregional weaving labs around Europe. And I was really wondering kind of if there is weaving with that organization that you guys are doing, looking at ways to integrate these approaches, because obviously this movement is really moving forward. People are starting to catch on. There's even sort of mention of these things in the EU, which is really amazing. So I'm really curious to see sort of the kind of inroads you're doing and the kind of weaving that you are doing with other movements, particularly in Europe.
Thank you for that question. The short answer is a lot. Is that we're all friends. Like, we're really good friends with Karen Mueller and with Noah and with the folks at Common Land Foundation and with the folks at the Bioregional Weaving Center that's in the UK with Isabel Carlisle. Sarah Prosser, who's active in Ireland, is also active in the design school. Just to say, there's multi-directional relationships already there, but they're not necessarily visible. And all I mean by that is that we are supporting each other within the constraints each of us have. And like the Bioregional Weaving Labs Collective is now growing its capacity, but it started off pretty small and agile. So their capacity to actually facilitate a lot of things was limited. I'm very glad to say that that's changing. And I would also say that part of what we're doing through the design school is creating a larger cultural context of shared entry points into this space. And so, like, you'll see, for example, that there's a really dynamic Mediterranean group, which includes people that are part of that network in Europe, but also a part of the network in Northern Africa. And that they are finding their way to each other through geographic, basically by being in the same broader geographic areas. Similarly, for the rivers of the North Sea, which has been shared about in the chat, that is connecting with some of that work. It's just to say there's multi-directional connection, and I see the coherence is that there is a building movement toward a European Bioregional Congress, which will probably take some time to happen, but that in the background, there's a lot of conversation about how we build coherence. So that's like the medium answer to a big question, but I would say there's quite a lot, and we're all working toward the same goals. And so, yes, and we're very glad they have the capacities they have because we complement each other very nicely. And we look forward to more. So thank you for that question. And now I'll go over to Moonbeam Blossoming. Hello.
Hi. My mind is exploding all over the place with so much information, but I'm so grateful to be here. I am in Cascadia in the Chimacum watershed. You can hear me okay, right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
A little nervous. Okay, so anyway, I appreciate it very much. I work with both permaculture and astrology, and one of my main focuses is helping all of us working to restore harmony on Earth, helping people to understand that there already is a rhythm of natural time, and that that's specific to the moon and the Earth and the co-system with the sun. And I was so appreciated that you reflected on the equinoxes and you reflected on the moon cycle. But as an astrologer, I can't help but wonder, did you actually use that process to help time these events? And are there resources around how much the earth, air, fire, water cycle within the lunation cycle is the pattern for all life?
Ooh.
Thank you.
The answer is we are very explicit and intentional about building from those patterns. So that's one thing I would say. And being in some place like where I am in the Northern Andes, there's a lot of connection because we're in the tropics, and the cycle of growth is that we basically have like 5 growth cycles per year where we are.
Wow.
So it's not like the 4-season cycle of North America. It's very different. And that means the lunar cycle dominates. When they do pruning is based on whether the water pressure is higher or lower in the trees, for example, and that's very dominant, very strong. I think it's very strongly represented in the indigenous cultures in the tropics around the planet. So that is to say, yes, those kinds of cycles are very much interwoven, and also that there are many people in this community that take a deep kind of ecofeminism, deep spirituality, astrology. It's like that realm is just very present here, is what I would say. It's very present.
Okay. Yeah, my question, just if I could rephrase it a little bit, I'm curious about if the events itself, we're in a waning moon, we just started Mercury and Venus retrograde, and it's a Scorpio moon, a very intense fixed energy. So I just am curious if this event was started with that intention or if it's just the cosmos intention. Thank you.
Seems like that was the cosmos's intention, and it sounds very well aligned. So thank you so much for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you're here.
Me too.
And now over to you, Donna. Welcome.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Hi. Wonderful to be here. Much welling up in me as well, and feeling very much at home. And I think much of what I've been realizing is, and it's reflected in all that's being shared here, is there's work that's about the readiness for the messiness. And what really comes through is, intuitively, that dance is underway and things are just happening, but with clear strategy as well as living into the emergence. And so I think what comes through really loud and clear is this is as much an unlearning journey as it is a learning journey, and deeply humbling. And the more we enter into it, I think we become softened, opened up around the humbling aspect of being able to recognize we're just one in many, and it's not about trying to collapse them all together into some kind of homogenized heap. It's more around how do we honor and support a lot of confluence in a lot of places, which has really been much of what my work is about. So the one thing I was just going to, it's less of a question, but I've been engaging quite a bit with Vanessa Andriotti.
Mhm.
And I'm looking forward to potentially bringing in some of the embodied inquiry work that is coming out of that work there. So I think people may have followed some of her work around hospicing modernity and the composting that we're all engaging with. So I will stop myself at this point. And I'm new to the community, but I also often will say my favorite word is "and." So it's also okay to interrupt me at any time, because nothing ever feels finished. It never is. It's part of an ongoing flow. So thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you, Donna. And I want to bring today's session to a close with a couple of points. One is that we have a host team that has joined us to support us with co-facilitating the community calls and helping with sense making, that will be supporting us. So I have a group of about 10 people. And so we'll write a post and introduce you to all of them soon, so that you can get to know who the other members of our host team are for the learning journey. And the other thing that I want to name as we're starting this process is that because of the gentle rhythm of a webinar every 2 weeks, that you can actually invite people to join the webinar later, or I'm sorry, to join the learning journey later. So if you watch the session and you're like, wow, I really think that someone else should be here, it's not too late for them to join. And just as a general heuristic, as long as someone joins within about 2 months of the learning journey, 2 months is 4 webinars. It's not that hard to catch up. And so to say that we've actually found it really important to encourage you, now that you have a better feel for what it is that we're doing here, to invite people that you feel should be here. And that you can keep doing that throughout the coming weeks, because it's actually the design school, I like to jokingly say it's like a Trojan horse, where you have the guys that are hiding inside of the thing and they think they got one thing, they got something else, is that people think they're signing up to an online course. But then when they join the design school, they discover they're in this very dynamic and very complex community of practice. And the online course, the learning journey, is really just one part of it. And that actually we build our capacities by the ways that we collaborate with each other. So I just wanted to encourage you to invite more people to come, that it's not too late, and to bring what we're doing here into your communities as we'll be learning to organize. Because the whole point of this is for us to change the world, not to talk about changing the world. And one of my big frustrations as a philosopher, the part of me trained in philosophy, was this stupid mind-body dualism thing, as if that ever existed. If those of you don't know, part of my background is in embodied cognition. And I worked with a guy named George Lakoff at one point in time. So I have a really deep understanding of how the mind and the body are the same dynamic process. So I would argue there's no way to learn about your bioregion without going and walking in your bioregion, without sitting by a stream and listening to it, without hearing the sounds of music of the insects in the morning that are unique to your place. And we want this immersion in place to be front and center in this learning journey, even though the easiest part to understand is that there's a Zoom call every 2 weeks. That's the easiest part to understand. The reality is, just as Donna said, we're stepping into this messiness and we don't shy away from it. We actually let the complexity be there. And so I'm going to remove my spotlight now so we can all see each other and say that it is just an incredible honor to be able to be here with you. You have to have more than 200 people show up on our first call, and for us to be able to invite more. For those of you who were here last year, you can already feel it's really different. And what we want to do is weave ourselves into the biosphere of the earth and weave each other and help each other to do it. And so we're just so excited. And we want to thank you for being here with us. And we're looking forward to learning from you, to learning with you, and to creating spaces together for us to learn where we all need to go in the spaces that we haven't even discovered that we need to learn in yet. And so on behalf of Penny and myself, we just welcome you into the design school and into the learning journey. And onward, fellow humans, let's do this. Let's make this happen. And we're really excited. So thank you so much. And we'll see you in the flow of the coming weeks and months. Thank you, everyone.